Joseph Hill of Culture says, Bingy man throw one stone and it bring a bad feeling to all wicked men. Now, we are speaking with Selvon Mr. Shak, Noel, who throws a lot of bois and so much more. So wondering how people will be feeling about that. But we say good evening, sir. Very glad to have you joining us this evening.
Yeah, man, give thanks, give thanks. Glad to be here with you. It's been a while.
It has, it has. But some people say that God is a Trinity and the carnival get away. But how have you been? What has your routine been like since carnival to now?
Well, it's been a challenge because I mean traditionally, fortunately, I consider myself to be one of the Calypsonians who even though people pay more attention to me during the carnival season, I operate outside of the carnival season. I tend to be more active than most during the course of the year. So as far as it's been a challenge because of course for artists like myself, the bulk of our revenue really comes from performance, right? And events and so on. So that has been a challenge. And then in my specific case, beside the performance, I also would usually in a freelance capacity go to different schools throughout the country and do different workshops on ISO writing, performance. Sometimes schools would call me in to work with their choirs and so on for different events. So, and of course, it's been a kind of domino effect, of course, as it has been for a lot of other sectors. But yeah, it's been challenging.
Look, one of the things I've seen you do with regard to that challenge is to have quarantine quotas live from the living room. What's that about?
Well, quarantine quotas really, it started as I wasn't really a planned thing. It really started, it was a response really to during the first round, the first phase when we had to go into lockdown and quarantine. I saw some conversations taking place both online and publicly that I thought it was just out of time and out of context. It was really misplaced, and I felt like it disturbed me enough that I felt the need to respond to it in a particular kind of way. But I had to figure out what that response would have been. I didn't really think it was the time or circumstance for the response to be met with the same kind of, for it to be met with the same kind of negative energy. So what I decided to do was to use one of my mediums, which is main medium, which is music, and to send the message to us in general as a society, who we know ourselves to be, who we ought to be in times of challenge and in times of difficulty that it seemed like a lot of us forgot. So I decided to use the music, as I say, and I decided to utilize specifically songs from within our local musical landscape. So I drew on particular songs, specific songs that I feel the messages and the lyrics and the mood lent to that. And what I decided to do was to present those songs, putting my own twist by reharmonizing the chords and the melodic structure. Well, try to keep the melodic structure, but reharmonize the chords, touch some of the lyrics where I felt, I could take some artistic license, but for the most part, try to keep the lyrics intact. But really, as I say, just to send the message and to remind us that we have already been shown through our griots and our musicians who we ought to be in times like that. And what I was seeing was a difference with who I thought we ought to be and what I thought we ought to be focusing on. So it was my way to try and refocus people, basically.
And what was people's response to that attempt of yours to refocus, to put a different energy into the space?
It was surprisingly positive. And when I say surprisingly, I mean, whatever I do, I always put my best foot forward. I go in positive and hope for the best, right? But still, even the response was quick because after the very first one I did, I can't remember exactly what date it would have been, but it would have been sometime in April, maybe May. The very first one I did, I started doing a cover of Shadows One Love. And after that very first one, I started being contacted by certain people. A writer from one of the daily newspapers actually contacted me and did a feature on it. And then by the second installment, which was the week after, actually one of your colleagues, Rokas, he contacted me. And, we did an interview on Talk City. And he featured some of the music there as well. And as the weeks progressed, more and more people started reaching out to me, other radio stations and so on. So, and there's people in society in general who would send me messages, who would see me when I do take the occasion to vent out, to get things to come back in. And, people would see me and just give me kudos and tell me thanks and that kind of thing. So it was, I think it achieved the objective even beyond what I was anticipating.
And that makes me ask the question of what do you see the role of the artist being? Because there's been conversation about who is essential and who's more essential than who. But in terms of the role of the artist, the musician, the griot, as you said, to inspire, to raise spirit, especially during times like these?
I think, even outside of COVID, I think the artists, the musicians, and artists not just musically, across all spheres. I think our societal role is very integral. And if we're talking specifically in a Trinbagonian perspective, I think it ought to be more integral than it is, right? In an everyday perspective, people pay attention and they focus in on the artist and what the artists have to say around carnival time. It's like we try to peg everything in the artistic realm to carnival, right? And there's so much about our artistic spheres that resonates and could bring value from a societal perspective outside of the whole carnival conversation. So I think that our role is integral. It ought to be more integral, especially in this place in Trinidad and Tobago, in the place that we say is the home of Calypso and Steel Pan and Soca and all these things that we tag Trinidad as being the home of. But we don't behave like that. We don't treat these things as such on any level. Because even how it is dealt with from a policy perspective, by the technocrats and the people who are supposed to know better, the way it has been traditionally dealt with, it speaks to, when you see people at those echelons treating arts and things of artistic natures as afterthoughts, it really informs how the rest of the society views it and treats with it as well. But I think it is more integral than people recognize. I think we play a much more of an important role in a general sense of really keeping the society, tight to its moorings, showing the society itself good, bad, or indifferent. And I think that when you're, even more so when you're challenged by a situation like what we're facing now, a global pandemic, people almost automatically started looking to the artists to raise their spirits and to give them some hope.
I think part of it sometimes when you have a little more water than flour, then you realize what starts to kind of rise to the surface. But I think part of the challenge as well is being able to add value, or not add value, but quantify the level of value. Because I think the easiest way to do is this is equal to this amount of money. So when people can't say, okay, well, this is how we add value, or you have a value scheme that money is not the end all and be all, and you're looking at things that it's hard to quantify, that's part of the issue. But we will continue this conversation. We're speaking with Selvon, Mr. Shak, Noel, and when we return, we have so much more. Stay with us.
As we move, so we love Trinbago, and that is without question. But there are times when out of love, you must address certain issues and things that present themselves. So here we go now. They wouldn't like this one, oh no, but who the cap fit? They've got to wear it. So let me see you put your hands up. Don't let them drop, keep them up.
And definitely, there's some things that we need to address, and we are doing that with Selvon, Mr. Shak Noel, on this evening. And we're always a good opportunity to say hello to the young lady Ajibola, aka Gigabyte, as told by Mr. Shak. But you said you love Trinbago, but there's some things that are rearing their head and you need to address those situations. And this brings us right where we are: Black Lives Matter, politics, race. I've seen you sharing some of your views. Asking you to do that now, thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, just those two things that you itemize, their politics and race. We know that they are, potentially very divisive. For me, when both those things combine in that kind of divisive way with that divisive intent, I think that is ultimately obscene. Because my thing about it is that we strive towards an ideal in Trinidad and Tobago, which is that every creed and race find an equal place. It's an ideal we strive towards and we live towards trying to realize every day. That being said, though, it is an ideal that I don't think we have kept in perspective, in realistic perspective. Because even though that is an ideal, as evidenced by what we have been seeing, both coming out of the COVID situation as well as the political situation, I think that we have never really acknowledged and faced from a realistic standpoint what really pervades and exists as far as our race relations in the country, right? I feel like we have never really analyzed it from a societally historical perspective to understand, because for me, I think because of our history and our passage through time as a nation, as a cosmopolitan nation, there have been certain biases, prejudices that have been ingrained in us. However you want to look at that, that's the reality, right? There are certain biases and prejudices that exist, and we have never really, I don't think as a society in a real serious way, we have really examined the historical nature of those things, why a lot of those prejudices and biases exist, what would have been the state of play example for when indentured servants would have come here and met, African slaves and former slaves, and what would have been that dynamic between the two. We historically, we have never analyzed those things to put those things in a perspective of greater understanding. We focus on that ideal, as I say, of here every creed and race find an equal place, and we kind of have glossed over for a long time the parts of our existence that does not really live up to that on a daily basis, So we see those things rear its head in opportunistic times. And then, after a period when it's not so present, it kind of died down, and below the surface, it's still there. It's still there, and until we are willing to engage with that honestly and engage with it with a view towards really getting some hardcore understanding, I don't know that we are going to shift many people's perception.
Oh no, I'm wondering what's the role of Calypso in this type of conversation? And I've cited two examples to ask that question. One, I remember someone saying that Calypso would have had a hand in running some ethnicities out of the Calypso tent. That's one. And then the other day, I saw something from, I think, Eric St. Bernard, who was saying that we need a little more soak at this time for lifting spirits, because Calypso can be very divisive. What's your take on that?
I am often at odds with a lot of the views that Eric St. Bernard shares. I have to be honest about that, right? I don't negate a lot of what he says, but I think a lot of Eric's views might be, I mean, I don't know that it's intentional on his part, but I think a lot of Eric's views and people of his ilk who share that views seem to they think of things in a very myopic perspective, right? Because for me, I mean, there are so many, angles we could take this from. I have never understood what is this great chasm, this great divide that has been created between soca and calypso. I've never understood it. And if you listen to my music, I think you would understand why I don't understand it, right? Because I am one of the artists who has been able to present songs that would deal with serious societal issues while at the same time infusing a kind of energy that would make people want to move and make people want to enjoy themselves. And so, you know, that is because that is what I was conditioned on. You know, that is what I saw from the artists who informed my journey. So I am always kind of at a loss as to where this great separation happened, because the truth of the matter is, DK, a lot of the soca artists now, a lot of the present artists who call themselves soca artists, if you listen to a lot of the music that they are actually doing calypso, but they will not say the word, right? And so when you have people talking about we need more soca, I don't know that in a time like this particularly, right? What, you know, and I mean, everything has its time and place and purpose. So I don't want to seem like I'm piling on festival music, what I term as festival music. But I'm saying in a time like this, people really need to be given hope. And I'm not saying that there's no soca music that can do that. But to focus and say that what we need is more soca as opposed to calypso, because of course there are calypsos that can be and have been divisive. There have been soca music that has been divisive and in the same way. So I think that broad brush, you know, is really unfortunate, because there are a whole lot of calypsos that seek to bring people together, right? Seek to keep people focused on the principles of us as a society that really ought to pervade the positive parts of it. So those statements, I hear them, they always kind of bother me, and I don't really pay much credence to them. What I try to do
but don't let them bother you too much. But I will say in terms of having just over a minute again, and once again saying that it wasn't his direct quote, it was someone who posted to his page. But moving and looking at shifting the worldview and the look and the festival music and calypso, do you think it may be a good thing to possibly not have the calypso competition or festival competitions in 2021?
I don't know about good thing or not good thing. What I would say is, for me, the reality of the situation is that as far as calypso is concerned, and even soca to some degree, not as much as calypso, the pinnacle of our expression still remains competition stages, unfortunately. And I would say unfortunately, because for a long time I've been saying that I think we need to move to a place where competition is not so much of the be-all and end-all of the relevance of calypso, right? That being said, maybe this is a situation that has presented itself that will force us now to be innovative enough to find a way to actually do that. On the flip side of that, though, is for many Calypsonians, competition is the way that Calypsonians have an opportunity to make a lot of money all in one fell swoop, right? So if that presents itself, then, you know, of course, that can't be a negative thing. But if you're looking at in a wider perspective, I really feel we need to try and find ways to move to the place where competition doesn't dictate so much the relevance of calypso.
And definitely that is where, sadly, we will have to leave it today. Thank you so much for sharing more than Bois and Lyrical Lati, Mr. Shak, Selvon Noel. And we want to thank you for tuning in. And as on behalf of the entire team, have a good night.
As we move, so we love Trinbago, and that is a tough question. But there are times when out of love, you must address certain issues represent themselves. So here we go now. They wouldn't